As much as something feels daunting in the moment or that it's going to last forever, I think it's helping parents to realize, yeah, in those days or weeks, it feels like it's never ending and there won't be a resolve. But with time and consistency, you'll get over the hump. And I think it might feel like you're in the thick of it and you can't even see the light at the end of the tunnel, but your child and you will come to the other side, and you just have to remain faithful in the process.
As Christians, we know we're called to live lives that are different from the world around us. This isn't aimless, but purposeful. And as parents, we know this to be true for our children and our approach to education as well. So how do we do this? How can we be thoughtfully and intentionally different in education, parenting, community, and culture? Is your child ready for kindergarten? How can you be sure? Starting school is a big step, and choosing the right school can feel overwhelming. At Trinity Classical Academy, we believe readiness goes beyond academics. It's about laying the foundation for a lifetime of learning and developing godly character. On this episode of Different by Design, join Trinity's kindergarten faculty as they share practical insights on what truly matters when preparing your child for this exciting milestone. Welcome to Different by Design. Welcome to Different by Design. I'm Matt Dixon, and I'm grateful today to have a few guests with us. Liz Cato, of course, as our founder and head of school, alongside Trinity's kindergarten faculty, Harmony Stickles and Christina Damaris, to talk about the beginning of a student's journey at Trinity in our early childhood education classrooms. Everyone, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Dr. D. And I'm so excited to be here with Christina and Harmony. Really looking forward to this time.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we're excited to be here.
Well, before we get started, I'd love both of you to share a little bit about your background, both educationally and here at Trinity. Because Liz, you've actually known both Harmony and Christina in a little bit different context for quite a while, right?
Yes, I have had the privilege of knowing both of these ladies. Gosh, when Harmony was in 8th grade, I taught her at La Mesa Junior High and our relationship over the years. And then Christina came as when she was a little first grader in our first founding class of kindergarten, first and second graders. She was in first grade.
That's great. And for both of you, what's kind of your background? How did you come to be at Trinity? Christina, it sounds like you didn't really have a choice. You've been here since
forever. Yeah.
Since first grade. No, Harmony, so what's kind of your background? What made you want to work at a place like Trinity?
Well, I grew up in Santa Clarita, going to just through the public school system, and went to college and was in my credential program at the time and just looking for the next steps and where I'd want to apply, and had kind of tracked with Trinity over the years with the Santa Clarita magazine. So reached out to Mrs. Cato and told her I was finishing up, and kind of that's what started that conversation, and came to Trinity, observed a little bit, went through the interview process, and then now 14 years later, I've never left. But at Trinity, I've taught 6 years in 4th grade, 6 years in 6th grade, and now this is my 2nd year in kindergarten.
What about it for you? Because obviously, I mean, there's a practical side where I'm sure you're looking for a job, but what was it specifically about Trinity that you thought, I want to spend my time there?
I would say, I think as most parents probably see, and any visitor on campus, it's very captivating, the community and the culture, as soon as you step in the doors of Trinity. In fact, I remember just the night before my interview, it was Super Bowl Sunday, and at the time, now my husband, my boyfriend and I came and walked like the outside campus, and I was like, there's no way I'm ever going to be able to work at a place like this. And then just feeling intimidated because of how intentional everything was, but then actually going for the interview with Mr. Culp the next day, instantly just the warmth and the difference is captivating. And so I think that there was that draw at the time. Again, I wasn't married, didn't have children, but as I began to work there and see the intentionality and the design and the Christian worldview and importance of that, I knew there was no better place I would want for my children And so that's what's kept me at Trinity, is wanting the very best from a parenting standpoint, and then from a faculty standpoint, wanting to contribute to the next generation and continue the mission of the school. And that Christian worldview, I feel like, is just the greatest blessing and gift I can give my children, along with helping them become good, deep thinkers.
That's great. And Christina, obviously you experienced this education for yourself. And I think honestly, it speaks to probably what you experienced here that you would actually want to come back. But first, I'm curious, can you talk a little bit about your time here at Trinity as a student, what that was like? I'm sure that had, its bumps along the way, but what did you appreciate from your time in first grade, little Christina, to when you graduated in 12th grade?
Yeah, I, like Harmony was talking about, just appreciated the community so much. Being in such a small school, everyone knew everything about your life, which had its pros and cons definitely growing up. But it was just great that my friends that I made in elementary school, I really had all the way through to graduating 12th grade. I loved being at the same school as my family. I think that was really fun, that even when my brother was in elementary school and I was just going into high school, to be a part of his life so much too, I think is really special. And even seeing that with Harmony and her kids, and the way that her kids come in and out of her classroom, and just the family aspect of it all is really fun.
And then at what point did you know you wanted to be a teacher?
Well, I went to college for public relations and advertising.
Yeah. So that's what you're doing now.
Yes, exactly. The podcast, PR for the school. I started nannying after college when I didn't have a job right away for a family that actually goes to Trinity, and just felt a call on my life that I needed to be working with kids in a more intentional way. And so I went back and got my credential and went through the whole student teaching process and ended up at Trinity.
That's great. And I remember your first, you were a long-term sub for Mrs. Auger in first grade, and you had my son and you had Mrs. Stickle's son.
I did.
Which was the first time I knew you as a student, but the first time I got to see you as a teacher. And we've shared this and we've talked about this, but I've been so grateful, even at that time, being impressed of, wow, she knows her students well. She knows the material. I'm sure it's a process for all of us when you see someone as they mature and as they grow up, but really for both of you, just grateful for what you have given to our students and what you continue to give to our students in kindergarten. So I know that many parents are always concerned about, well, kindergarten's kind of a big start. That's an emotional thing where you're handing your child off, right? The greatest gift and greatest resource that God has given to us as parents is our children. And I think that can be a very scary thing about who you're entrusting them to. And so I think even recently I heard this statistic, and it is in my mind often when we think about influence and we think about our children coming to, first and foremost, know Christ, but just shaping who they are, that on average, a student that enters kindergarten through 12th grade will spend anywhere between 12 and 15,000 hours at school. And so I don't think that's insignificant. And yet, I think even without knowing that specific statistic, that's on the hearts and minds of families, right? That's on the hearts and minds of parents. And I think many parents, as a result, when they see the options out there for their children and the people who are going to influence them, they do want a different option. They do want something unique. We talk about this often, right, Liz? The three greatest influences in a child's life, the home, school, and church. And home and church in particular, those are established by God. And then we know education and the process of learning in and of itself is a joy that we get to experience together. And so when we're looking at those influences, again, I think my heart resonates with parents who have that concern, who walk into our doors and wonder, is this the right place for my kid? Are these the right people that they should be spending their time with? So choosing the right school, all that to say, it's a process. It's challenging and it's difficult. But when you look at that from your perspective as kindergarten teachers, Liz, and your experience as head of school and starting a school, all of that, what have you seen as far as what families are looking for when they come here? Does what I'm saying resonate with what conversations that you have had with families over the years, that you guys have had with families even as of late, as far as what they're looking for?
Yes, I believe what you're saying is true. And it's interesting when I sit here on this side now, having taught Harmony when she was much younger, and then even Christina and her journey at Trinity, and being on the other side of it and seeing these women now, the whole idea, for instance, in someone in my position is hiring and having people around all of our children, my own children included, when they were here, you feel at peace or a comfort or knowing that they too want the same things for our community or their children, that they are in pursuit of the things that we say as a school themselves, that then they can model that to the children that they're serving. So that is a big part in when I think families choose schools. Will the people around them reflect the values that they hope for, not only for themselves, but for their children?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what about conversations you guys have had with parents, whether that's prospective parents or even families that end up coming here? Does what she's saying seem consistent as far as what parents care about?
Yeah, I think they care about the character formation of their child. And that's why I'm here at Trinity, is because I want more than academic success for students. I want them to be good people with good hearts and that love the Lord. And so in talking with parents and hearing their appreciation for that, and that is such a big part of what we do at Trinity, especially in grammar school, and focusing on obedience and self-control and respect and diligence. It's really important for families too, whether they know it or not going into it, but then to experience it throughout even a few weeks of school has been important for them.
Yeah.
To add to that, two other factors that come to my mind are that parents are looking for kind of a retreat, a safe haven for their children and their family, that community feel that is different than what the world is providing or offering. I think that's a huge thing for families, that they're kind of looking for just that safe space. Not that it's perfection, not that there's not sin, but just that their child will be shepherded, their family will be partnered with. And so with that safe haven comes the other thought that came to my mind, which is that partnership. I think they're looking for someone to get in the trenches with them and partner with them, be a good communicator, come alongside their child and them, and help equip both the parent and the student. And so I think those are two things that I know for my family, I value, and then just different conversations I've had that I feel like prospective families that are looking, and then families that choose Trinity, those tend to be two factors as well.
And going off of what you're saying, Harmony, even when I think of like Christina and the journey that we had with you, 1st through 12th grade, there were ups and downs with teachers or navigating what you were learning or relationships and the activities that you were involved in and your parents being involved. And because of this partnership, like you mentioned, Harmony, then we have the privilege in working through the gospel and with the gospel in those challenges, and then staying the course and seeing the fruit of then what the Lord does with working through something, or a student working through something hard at school and then having success and reaching a certain capacity. But we've said this before, how it takes the whole time, and you get them in their littlest of littles, our babies. So you begin that process for them. And then hopefully it's consistent all the way through.
So what you're saying is Christina didn't come perfect.
Yeah, you're making me sound like a problem student.
No, not at all. I'm saying that for every child and parents, this journey of being parents and raising children and being in community is a journey.
I think that's a good question, though, that probably many parents worry about when they're looking for the right place for their child, or even, to be honest, applying. Right? For us as a private Christian school, we're going to have this application process. And I think there are many parents that have the misconception that their child has to come perfect, right? And that we're only going to be accepting perfect children that have it all figured out. But that's not education, right? That's not the purpose of school. That's not the purpose of parenting, all of those things. I remember we had a speaker come that we had heard at the ACCS conference last summer, Keith McCurdy. He came and spoke to our community not too long ago. And it was interesting. I remember him talking about this phenomenon that has occurred over the last 40, 50 years in the United States, where, especially just as we've seen changes in our culture, it used to be a shared morality that existed. And so while children came to kindergarten maybe not knowing their letters, maybe not knowing how to count, maybe not knowing all the academic things, they came ready to obey. And as a result, they were educable and they were ready to learn because they were used to being in an environment, again, at least a moral context where they understood authority, they understood the importance of things like obedience and self-control, like you were talking about, Christina. What would you say to that parent that's concerned on that end as far as like, oh, my child needs to know all these things? Like, what truly for us would we say makes a student kindergarten ready? Like ready to walk in the door and be successful as a Trinity student? What does that look like in your classrooms?
This is just one little area of it, but what you just mentioned, Matt, being ready to obey, self-control, the respect piece of respecting your teachers, respecting your peers, all of that, that's all valuable. But I think that part of it is just teaching children to have humility, modeling humility at home to where they're open to receive feedback. They're open to receive guidance. And same with parents, but having the sense of teaching your child and being honest with them that they have so much to learn and to grow, and their emotions may lie to them in a moment. And that emotions they fluctuate very easily. But the humility piece of just being open to receive correction or open to receive, like I said, guidance, I think that's a huge, huge piece that can be a discussion at home and that can be modeled in the house so that when a child does come to school, that is something they're already used to, or they have that mentality and are open to what comes in any given day based off of the conversations they might have with a teacher's assistant or with a friend or with a teacher. I think a heart of humility is huge.
Yeah, I would agree. It's along with humility is respect and being able to follow direction and being able to be moldable and listen to what your teachers are asking you to do, because so many young kids come in and they've been given anything they want at home, and then they come into a classroom with 20 other students and they have to share their time with the teacher, share their time with their friends. So being able to respond to that and be patient in all of it is huge.
Right.
And the process itself takes time. And that what I appreciate about all of our teachers, but in this case in particular with Christina and Harmony, is that. And so that's part of the journey for that little person, and that we grow in increments, and that over time they are able to see, oh, if I'm receiving instruction or needing to make a course change or a little correction, it's not the end of the world or anything for mom and dad or the little person. It just means we try to receive that and we show up the next day and try again, because we all grow over time.
Yeah. Harmony, you mentioned something in your response that to me, where I sit as a principal over grammar school, it seems like is a common thread and a common theme of conversations I have with students pretty much on a regular basis, which is the fact that how they feel is not necessarily, and oftentimes not, reflective of truth. That I do think our culture at large wants to tell our children, and as a result, even in how we parent and how we educate, that the most important thing about ourselves is how we feel. And that's just not true. That's just not what God's word tells us. Actually, it's the opposite of that, that the most important thing is resting in the truth of God's word and his revealed truth and his creation and all of those things, because, like you said, feelings are going to come and go. I might feel like, I'm sure you have these kinds of conversations. I feel like no one likes me, right? Like I feel like you don't like me, or I feel like I'm not smart, or I feel there's so many feelings that come. I wonder, what does that look like for you? Because whether they use the exact word feel, I'm sure that's the common thread that comes your way, whether it's related to their education, academics, relationships, behavior, all of that type of stuff, friendships, right? What does that look like in your classroom when you have the student coming to you saying, I feel this way? How do you respond to that?
I think the biggest thing that I've learned from Harmony is just asking them why they feel that way and then redirecting their thoughts. So whether it's, I feel like my friends don't like me because they don't want to play with me. Well, what's the situation? What's the context? Well, they want to do this, but I want to do that. So they don't want to play with me, when it's really just reminding them they do want to play with you, but it's not all about what you want to do. Mm-hmm. We have to work together. We have to make decisions together as a team, or if they feel like nobody likes them, just reminding them of God's truth and how God sees them and how he views them. So it's just bringing it back to truth and reminding them of the reality that they live in, because their minds aren't capable of seeing all of it at once. And so bringing it to the forefront for them.
Absolutely. I think giving them the space and the place to be able to articulate their feelings and acknowledge them, and you're empathizing with that, is a great way to kind of help them put their defenses down a little bit, right? But it's not giving into them or affirming that in the sense of they're right or wrong for those emotions, but instead, like Christina said, it's acknowledging them and then redirecting them to truth. And I just think when you started the question too about, we have the best example of Jesus in human form, and if he just lived his life by his emotions or his feelings, we wouldn't probably be given the same gift of eternity that we are. And he was human. He experienced all of those emotions and feelings. And so I think it's helpful for us to take that example and to be able to teach our students and remind ourselves of that too, of that we can feel a certain way, absolutely. But what are we going to do with that to be proactive, to be a problem solver, to show grace, to remind ourselves of, is this something I'm thinking about just in terms of my own feelings right now, or am I considering everyone else in the picture? So I just think we constantly have that conversation with our students of bringing them back to truth, acknowledging it so they don't feel that we're dismissing their feelings, because I think that builds trust, right? And a relationship, but then helping them and shepherding them with solving the problem and what they can do, giving them actual proactive steps to handle those emotions, and then maybe some strategies that they can take with them to solve that conflict.
And I'm grateful when I see that lived out for you guys, for all of our teachers. Liz, I know that starts from the top for all of us to say, no, we're invested in our students and we want to point them to truth with a capital T, right? Not just as society or culture sometimes try to say, like, your truth. No. There is real truth with a capital T. And that starts with, and it's rooted in God's word. And we want to point our students to that, not just in an academic, intellectual pursuit, but in an everyday relational, behavioral understanding, because God created us to be more than just minds. He created us as whole beings.
What I appreciate about what both Christina and Harmony and yourself were saying, and just the culture of our school, that early on in their little 5-year-old selves, they are being shepherded to work through those relational things biblically, like, oh, okay, we need to go talk to our friend and work this out and apologize. And we do that face to face, and we have that conversation so early on, as kindergarten does that, and then it's reflected also first, second, third, all the way up. Really, by the time they are in high school, they know when they have a conflict with a friend that Mrs. Macedo will say, well, what do we need to do? And they know that I got to work this out, because it can be worked out, and we can see the fruit of restoration and forgiveness and working through things. But it starts very early with what you all are doing in kindergarten.
Yeah. And it's what we do as faculty.
Yeah.
And just anyone on campus, that's the expectation. I never knew about peacemakers or that whole process until working at Trinity. And truly, it's shaped what I do even outside of school. And it's been life-giving and restorative. And we don't just ask our students to do it, but we are expected, and we're used to that practice even as employees too.
Yeah. I think that's an example of, you hear a lot of buzzwords in education, and specifically in, I would say, in Christian educational institutions, we hear the word or the words Christian worldview, right? That we teach things from a Christian worldview. But I'm curious what that looks like in your everyday. Like, what does that look like in your classroom? Knowing that that's what we were just saying, that's one piece of it. Knowing that the education goes beyond, we're learning these specific subjects. But what other ways do you see that actually played out? That talking about things from a biblical lens or talking about things from a Christian worldview isn't just relegated to quote unquote Bible class, that we do over here, and we happen to read the Bible. And so that means we're a Christian school. No, it's more than that. So what ways do you guys see in the regular rhythms of your days and in your classroom, this idea of a Christian worldview being played out?
Well, I think it permeates in everything that we do. It's hard to even pinpoint, but from the beginning of our day to the end of our day, it's just what we do at Trinity. So it's opening the day with prayer. It's having our catechisms that we do, time set aside for helping shepherd our kids in the Bible and in Scripture. Christina, we have days of the week, right? So Love Monday, Temperance Tuesday. So then they talk about what are those things, these biblical principles, and they learn kind of a call and response. And then they sing a little song that's catchy to just reiterate that. And then it's just how we pray with our students. So when I mention peacemaking, it's always when we have a hard conversation, we're always closing in prayer. We're praying with parents.
Yeah, it's just so much a part of our day to day and minute to minute, just everything we're doing, and even connecting certain subjects back to Bible. Like we were talking about snowflakes last week and how they have 6 sides. And then we read the story about how Satan tempts Jesus 6 times. And so just making those connections in class, whether or not it's about Bible, but about math, or we're spelling words and talking about it. And just the questions, I love the freedom that we have in class when someone brings up a question such as, what does heaven look like? And we're not even talking about heaven, but I can sit and have a conversation with them about it. And it leads to so much discussion. And then you have parents coming up to you and saying, we talked about heaven last night. And I can't even imagine how that was for you to talk about it in class. But just the freedom that you have to share your faith with your students and to help build their faith and their excitement for it all is just so fun. And I love that we get to do that at Trinity.
One of the most important things I know often from parents, and I remind them of this as well, is your child's going to come home and probably rarely talk about, the exact formula they learned in math that day. There's probably 2 things that you're going to talk about. A story that they read, right? Something that captures their heart and their imagination. But then most importantly, the thing they're going to talk about is their teacher. And that's who they're going to remember. I know for myself, when I think back, I have no idea what curriculum was used in first grade. I think I learned some stuff, hopefully, right? Reading and math and all the rest. But I can tell you my first grade teacher's name. I can tell you my second grade teacher's name. I can tell you how they felt about me, and I can tell you some things about them. Namely, did they love Christ? Did they love their students? What's something that they were passionate about? Those are the things that even at this point in my life, I still recall and I still remember. And I think that's important for us in all that we do as educators, as teachers, that we keep that on the forefront of our minds. I always wonder, and maybe you don't feel like you're allowed to say, but do you have a favorite subject that you're like, okay, this is one I always look forward to teaching?
I love teaching phonics. I think
I knew you were going to say that.
Did little first grade Christina, would she be surprised that you're saying that?
What's sad for me is I don't even really remember all the things I learned back then.
Like I was just saying.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And I wish I did, because I'm at the same school that I teach at, so it would be nice to kind of compare, but I don't remember it. But I love the science behind reading. I love that there are rules that go with it, and because now when we read, we don't even think about it, but to really break it down and to teach somebody how to read, I think is really just incredible. And the fact that I get to be a part of that year after year and day to day is really special, because if kids can read, their minds they just learn so much after that. It's just such a building block to what comes next. So I love teaching phonics.
Yeah, I know we talk about learning to read so that you can read to learn, because that's kind of the gateway for education in many other ways for our students. That if they can hone that skill and do it well, they can read great books. They can read challenging things as they get older. And that only helps them learn really the rest of their life. So it's completely foundational.
I was going to say, I'm grateful I have the privilege of teaching my favorite subject, which is government, and going through that with our seniors at the stage where they're at. And what I see with them is really almost a culmination of the process and the privilege and journey we have with our students. But even this semester, going back to what, Harmony, you were saying earlier with the relational aspect, in honors government, we have lots of conversation and topics that we are processing because it's very much a live, daily aspect of what we're doing in the government class with all that was going on, especially in an election year. And even in this semester, there was some heated dialogue as we were going through and looking at both sides. And I had a student know that they probably pushed it over the line a little bit in one of the exchanges. And all I really had to do was look at that student, and that he just right away went and apologized. And that was done live in front of the class. And there was an acknowledgement. And that in itself was, again, the process that our students are blessed to have when we're talking about what it means to live out of a Christian worldview, how we treat one another, what we say, how we respond, if and when we do step over the line or need to resolve something.
It's the realness, right?
Yes.
It's the realness that we provide, even as teachers, when we can be vulnerable to and share our struggles or our sinful nature. I think giving that space and providing that space and being actually intentional to work that in is amazing. I would say my favorite subject, gosh, it's changed with the different grades I've taught. It really has. But I think the one that I can really cling to in all three of the grade levels I've taught at Trinity would be literature. I just love the stories and really how the stories that we're reading or the chapters we're covering or the picture books now in kindergarten that we go through that have been hand selected, just what they provide in terms of a discussion or allowing students the space to, we talk in faculty meetings about creating a space for wonder, but really I feel like they become a vessel for teaching them not just life skills in character, building character formation, but also pointing them back to the Bible oftentimes. And I just feel like the discussions and the content that you can pull and kind of maneuver through literature is invaluable. And so I just feel like I have a passion for that.
You know, Liz, over the years, I'm sure this has happened, particularly with that start, you know, when students come in at kindergarten, and probably especially for the ones that this is, the families that this is like their first entrance into school. That is hard. That's overwhelming. You know, from what you've seen, and Harmony, Christina, from what you've seen in conversations you have, what are some of the bumps and struggles that you see kindergarten students go through that you wish parents knew were just normal? Like, this is to be expected, right? Because we all worry, like,
how long do we have?
Yeah. No, we all want that. Like, wait, is this is this normal for them to feel that way or wonder that, whatever that might be? What are some of those things that you wish parents just knew? Like, yeah, that's going to happen. That's normal.
Gosh, there's quite a few, and especially for our parents with their very, very first. Our parents who have 2 and 3 and 4 are often a little more relaxed by the time their fourth little person comes through.
But then they're dealing with another round of emotions of like, this is the last one, you know.
That's true. Yes. I just think, again, I know I'm on the other side of that journey with my children, but just that they would know it's going to be okay. Yes, there will be an occasional consequence or hard conversation because little Joey or so didn't respond appropriately. This is part of becoming then a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old. Like it is the journey, and it will be okay. And what I appreciate about our team is that, like, we know that we're in it with you to help gain an understanding when something doesn't feel like it's going quite well. What do we need to adjust? What can we do? There's a consequence. That's okay. We start again afresh.
And there's no judgment.
No.
That's the other thing is like, there's just no judgment coming from teachers and teachers' assistants. When there's a sin in question or a conflict or a situation that arises, it's really, we're all people that struggle too. And so having parents be reassured and students be reassured, this is all for the best interest of growing and shaping. That's the heart behind why we do what we do, and having the conversation and caring enough to have the conversation. And I think that's a piece of parenting too, and I bring it into teaching, but taking the time to have that conversation is showing love as opposed to just glazing over and realizing it's inconvenient. Parents are busy. I'm busy as a working mom, but I know that it's so much more valuable for me to not overlook something that's inconvenient for me in that moment, but actually invest that and dive harder into that and make the space for it and the time, because I am actually showing my children at home, or again, bring it to the classroom, my students, that I value them and I care about them as whole people. And the way I show that is by giving them truth. And it's by investing in ways that would be easier for me in the moment to overlook. But this is how much I cherish you, is because I'm going to take the time to really come alongside you and pray with you.
Yeah, it's loving them more, not less.
Exactly.
Even though it may not, again, as we were talking about before, feel that way.
Right.
Like, no, I'm going to press into this, or I'm going to engage with you in this way, or we're going to address this issue because, again, it could be academic, it could be behavioral, but I actually love you more, and I love you enough that this is going to become a conversation, or this is going to become a thing, because we care about you.
I do feel like we could talk about this question, for a very long period of time. But one of the things that came right off the bat when you asked it up in my mind, Matt, was just, I want parents to know and be reassured too that as much as something feels daunting in the moment, or that it's going to last forever. So I think they enter feeling like if there's a challenge or a concern, or their child is sad to come to school, or whatever you name the different scenario, I think it's helping parents to realize, yeah, in those days or weeks, it feels like it's never ending and there won't be a resolve. But with time and consistency, you'll get over the hump. And I think trusting the process in that, and realizing that it might feel like you're in the thick of it and you can't even see the light at the end of the tunnel, but your child and you will come to the other side, and you just have to remain faithful in the process.
And remember that Jesus never leaves us where we are.
And isn't surprised.
No, he's not, and wants to work with us in that through his word, through prayer, through people, to bring us to the other side of something.
I would say, along with what Harmony was saying, that your child, as much as you love them, is not perfect, and they're going to make mistakes, and we're here to help them grow from those mistakes. Anything we bring to them is not to be critical or to judge them. Like Harmony was saying, they're going to mess up, and that's what we're here as teachers to do, is to help them to see their faults and to grow from them and learn from it. And so having that humility, like we talked about earlier, as a parent, to realize that, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry that this happened. How can we move forward from it? And just the conversations we have as with parents when their kids mess up and they ask, like, well, what can we do at home? And goes back to the whole partnership. So just being totally on board for what we're doing at school, and understanding that it's just a process through and through.
Yeah, it's why they're coming to school, to learn, and learning is that process. It's the same. You wouldn't go to a doctor and it's like, well, your child has a fever. What?
Yeah.
I can't. My child has a fever? I can't believe it. But that's the point, is we're here to help in that process and what that looks like. And again, loving more, not less. Well, in closing, I would love if all of you could share with those who are listening what you might recommend to a family who's looking to properly prepare their child for kindergarten or TK, that start to school. What would you recommend to them? What should they do, and where could they look for some resources, and how to best prepare their child, or maybe even prepare themselves for this academic, educational journey?
I would say that what I've learned through my time, even at Trinity before having children, is the most beneficial tools and resources for me as a parent, and now even as a faculty member, is finding people to learn from, God's people in his community of believers that he surrounds me with. So I think what I did from a very early on time when I came to Trinity, when I didn't have children, was find families that I felt like their children stuck out to me. What they were doing was noticeable, and noticeable because it was different, and it was consistent, and it was intentional, and you could tell it was working or effective because it was shown in who their children were. So I started picking the brains of those families or those people. So I think resourcing people that you have maybe within your church community or at school that you feel like there's something about a family or a parent that they're really doing something you want to emulate, and it's taking time to ask them questions and just try to absorb as much as you can. I think it's being observant and noticing little subtleties in what makes maybe students or families different than yours, and just trying to pinpoint what those things could be. So I think resourcing the people in God's community are super helpful. There's obviously books you can read. Mrs. Fawcett, who was a kindergarten teacher years ago and beloved in our Trinity community, she, before I even had kids and I was just teaching, told me to read the book Shepherding a Child's Heart. So that's one that I even read prior to having children. But I think it's just also being in the Word yourself and really trying to discern what the Bible says in terms of parenting. That helps equip you better than anything. If you're starting your day in prayer or in the Word or seeking that out, that's going to also shape how your household functions and how your children arrive to school. We pray in the car every morning on the way to school in our family, and we pray at night before bed. And I tend to be more of a relational person, so I would say that that's how I gather my information, my resources, and learning experiences. I can't, obviously, my life experience is limited to just me, but what can I obtain and seek in others? And so I try to study and observe people, and then I try to find an opportunity to actually have dialogue.
Yeah, because you'd rather the relationship because you didn't learn phonics from Miss Damaris in her kindergarten class. So reading maybe is a little bit harder.
Right.
No,
right.
I'm just...
Exactly.
She doesn't read.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say that's my strategy is it's just going and pursuing conversation or observing and then figuring out what's different about that or that person or that family.
Yeah, I would say community is huge, and even having a community for your kids. So whether it's going to church and having them be a part of Sunday school and to learn from other teachers in Sunday school, or
and that authority.
Yeah,
like
the authority figure, having friends for them to play with and people, so they learn relationally how to interact with other kids, because they can relationally interact with a parent pretty easily because that's all they know, but they also need to interact with their peers. And so giving them the opportunity to learn that in a setting that isn't so much high pressure, not that kindergarten is high pressure, but it feels like it to parents. So giving them those opportunities to make little mistakes or learn how to be a good friend even before they come to school, I think is really important.
Yeah, teaching them communication. Communication.
Yeah.
Gosh, those are all good things. And I think also for parents, just resting in the fact that, gosh, the Lord's allowed you to be a parent, and He will equip you along the way as you are parenting the different stages, as we parent the different stages of our children, and for the parent to have grace and kindness even for themselves, that they're always learning as well. I mean, on the other side of it, with adult children, learning how to be a parent with adult children and what that means. I have learned that what I think is a suggestion is seen as a criticism. So I'm like, oh, I don't need to give all my suggestions. But just that our hope being too for our own parents, like the Lord will continue to equip us, help us equip. Like if you have a question, ask, like you're saying, ask someone who you think might be able to help you, whether it's a teacher or someone even in our community or their church community, or grandparents are a wealth of knowledge for
Is that your
parents.
plug right now for your own kids?
But I guess I could tell that could be taken that way.
I'm teasing.
I think it could be. But even speaking now to other grandparents, now that I'm a grandparent, how do we do that? But just resting in Jesus and knowing, like at a place like Trinity, that there's a lot of people around trying to do the same thing. So they're in good company. And to just kind of be at peace about that.
Great. Well, thank you all for joining me today. And I know this was, we talked about a lot of different things as it relates to kindergarten and kindergarten readiness and all of that. But ultimately, we know, and the hope is that this is going to be of great help to potential families, but also just current Trinity families as we build our community to know and love Christ in all that we do. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Different by Design. To learn more about Trinity Classical Academy, visit us at trinityclassicalacademy.com. And for more information about our approach to classical Christian education, be sure to check out the conversations over at the Classical Academy podcast. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe and share. Until next time.